Hi everyone, my name is Jerry Huntman and I'm the Managing Director of IFWG Publishing. I feel, and my company feels, honoured, privileged, and certainly ecstatic to be involved in this virtual launch. Not just because it's a virtual launch for the Paradox War, it's also because it's a celebration of the completion of the Zeke Hailey series. And it's been years in the making, and we certainly have been very happy indeed to be involved in the entire production life cycle for all that time. I should mention that some of the editors that were involved with this include Louise Zeta Thompson and also Noel Ossoldini. And the cover designs, the artwork was by Catherine Archer Smith, and also the design was by her, and also by Elizabeth Lang. Rest in peace. The whole exercise has been one where we've enjoyed the adventures of Zeke Hailey, and it is also an important point to make is that it's a middle grade book, and middle grade book, while they don't represent the largest number of volumes of books that we produce over the years, represent some of the best sales that we have. And the series really does represent a fantastic addition and contribution to our middle grade catalogue. So it's just fantastic. Before I hand over to the people that really matter, I should mention that there are some door prizes. For anyone who is watching this show who either likes the stream in Facebook or makes a post saying hi, or possibly asking questions during the question and answer, please do that, because then your name is going to be included, and then we'll do a draw at the end of this show, of this particular stream, and then we'll post very quickly after this stream the names of those winners. The winners, there'll be 5 winners. The number 1 draw will get signed, all 5 books signed and sent to them. The next 2 will get book 6 signed and sent to them, and the final 2 will be digital versions sent to them. So that's all really excellent and cool. Now, I think it really is important to get straight to the show, so I will introduce you to Isi Dixon.
Thanks, Jerry. Yes, hello, everybody. You might be wondering what I've got to do with Ian and why I am emceeing this event today. I met Ian over 10 years ago at the Nottingham Festival of Words. I was volunteering at the time at the event and got paired up with Ian on the press stand. We just hit it off, and we've been friends ever since. I interviewed him for a previous book launch, the 3rd installment of the Zeke Hailey series, The Particle Beast. You might be familiar with it. I must have done a decent job, because he asked me to do this again today. So here we are. We've got a full program for you for the next hour. We'll start with an intro about Ian and his books, and we'll also have a couple of readings from the Paradox War. And there's also an interview with Ian, as well as the opportunity for you guys to ask him some questions as well. So without further ado, let's dive right in. If you're not familiar with Ian C. Douglas, let's get to know him a little bit. After a London childhood, Ian studied a social work degree at Nottingham University. He worked in the Midlands in social care, and then he retrained as an English language teacher and taught in Hong Kong and South Korea and Thailand. How exciting. Upon returning to the UK, he graduated with an MA in creative writing, with a distinction no less, from Nottingham Trent University. And today he's best known for his mid-grade sci-fi series, The Zeke Hailey Adventures. The first in the series won the 2020 Islands Award. Awesome. Well done, Ian. He also writes short stories, mostly in the speculative genre for adults and for children. And his haunting of the Jabberwocky won the Gravity Awards in 2021. Again, another well done there. His non-fiction book, A Children's History for Nottinghamshire, was a local bestseller, and it was in so many schools. I know that it was. Other credits include apps, a radio play, and graphic fiction, and he accepts a variety of commissions, often as a ghostwriter. Currently, he is penning children's tales for an English language publisher with 2 million subscribers in China. Crikey. Ian mentors emerging writers, runs creative writing workshops, and visits schools. He is also the founder member of the Nottingham Writers Studio. He reviews for Left Lion, which is a local newspaper here in Nottingham, and he acted as the Nottingham Literacy Ambassador for the literacy charity Achievement for All. Ian appeared as guest of honour at Malta's Festival of the Literary Stars in 2019. And he shone very brightly, I'm sure. And he lives in Nottingham with his family. Welcome, Ian.
Oh,
So, but what about Paradox War, I hear you ask? That's why we're here, right? So, here we go. Let's do a very, very quick what it's all about. Mars has fallen and Earth is next. As the spiral tightens its deadly grip on humanity, Fitch Crawley serves as a murderous emissary. No one can stop them. Least of all Zeke Hailey on a far-flung moon, resurrected, but his memory wiped clean. Never has Zeke more needed his friends, but Scruff Barnum is gone. Hurled billions of years back in time, Scuff is trapped with the ancient Martians on the eve of the calamity that destroyed them. Could he change prehistory, or is he doomed to perish in a fiery apocalypse? Zeke struggles to cure his amnesia, aided by mysterious scientists and aliens. But even if Zeke recovers, what chance has he of returning to Mars for one last stand? Now that the colonists are dead and only robots and monsters remain, truly, the spiral will kill all life in the universe. Dun, dun, dun. This is probably a good point to ask Ian to give us a real flavor of the book. Ian, over to you. Can you give us a reading, please?
thank you. Yeah, it's been pinged there. So I'm just going to do a short reading from the beginning of the book. I should warn you that there are Martian words in this reading. And also, I thought I'd just say that I use the word kernel, not the kernel from an army, but the kernel that is a kind of a small nut. Okay, just take a sip of water, lubricate the tonsil. It was nothing, a kernel of energy, and no more. Outside of all things, outside of all universes, beyond time, beyond meaning, beyond form, the slightest scrap of awareness. Time cranked up and started. The kernel thought. He thought. Abstraction flowed around him, not colors, not shapes, simply a blur, nothingness. But he existed, he was something. Sadness ignited, a yearning for others. Weren't there others, others he once loved? Was his outsideness death? If so, death was terrifying. He didn't want that at all. He had to go back. But how? No, that wasn't possible. Forward then. Yes, he could go forward as long as he made it first. A universe could be created around him, created by him. The abstraction, changing constantly, acquired patterns. He needed a place. Of course, start with a place and build from there. He thought, and patterns became frequencies. I want a world. The frequencies were atoms flocking together in their trillions. They coalesced into one great colored shape. That color has a sound, he thought. Was it gazar? Yes or no. Another word. Red. Yes, that's it, red. And that shape, that was called something too. Planet. A red planet. But planets are supposed to be big, really big. They have details. Details formed. Those bumps are volcanoes, and the dips, like thumbprints, they're Safiwi. Or was it craters? Crater. Such an odd word. Safiwi sounded better. Canyons cracked open, and there were rectangles called rooftops. Rooftops meant others. Must get nearer, he thought, to that lowness, that ground. And he fell.
Oh, well, I definitely can't wait to hear more of that later. Well, Ian, we have some questions for you, of course, and I will kick it off with a few of them. So, how did you get into science fiction in the first place, and why are you writing in that genre and not in a different one?
Well, I guess I was called to the genre. Growing up in the sci-fi 60s and sci-fi 70s, it was inevitable. I always remember a little boy. I was growing up in the East End of London, and we went on holiday to the countryside, a caravan, where because you had a much better view of the stars than you did in central London in those days. Whew. And my father, who really I'd never got on with, but who seemed to be doing all right on this night, took me outside and showed me this star-studded sky. You know, it was that in itself was enough. My mind was blown. But my father had been a pilot in the Army Air Force during the war, and he started to trace patterns in the sky. You see, that square there is the wing towards Pegasus, and that W there is Queen Cassiopeia, and that broken pan, that is the Great Bear in the sky. And so, of course, my little 4-year-old mind was blown. The sky was full of characters and stories and legends. And I fell in love with astronomy, and my family sort of fed that for a while. I remember my grandfather bought me a book of astronomy, which I still have today, which was full of all these beautiful illustrations of what the planets might look like, you know, the landscapes of Venus and Mars, etc., etc. And that fired my imagination. And at the same time, because I'm being exposed to all these stories in the media, the earliest one I remember is Fireball XL5. I'm showing my age there. We used to watch the little puppets on their hover bikes fly over this great, awesome rocket in all its silver, black and white hues. And I used to think, that is the future. That is what I'm going to grow up to, rockets and hover bikes. And it didn't really turn out like that, but you know, I was hooked. And then of course there was Doctor Who, which it's hard to imagine back in the 60s, that was just so otherworldly. I don't think you can, even if you look at those old ones, you can't really today get that feeling of how new it was then, how otherworldly it was. And you know, I started reading Ray Bradbury, H.P. Lovecraft, Jules Verne, H.G. Wells, Andre Norton, John Wyndham, you know, the whole gang, and that was it. I was hooked. But can I just say that's how I got into science fiction, and why? To come to your question, well, for me, science fiction answers the big questions, which we could talk all day about. But to put it simply, where we in the universe came from, what we in the universe are now, and what we in the universe are going to become. So the big questions are posed by science fiction, and it can show us a roadmap and a blueprint of a better future. You know, I mean, Star Trek, for example, where it shows Earth where people are liberated from wage slavery and they've cured all the diseases. So it shows us, it aspires us to be better people.
That makes a lot of sense to me as a Trekkie. Absolutely. So, Paradox War, your latest book, it's the 5th in the Zeke Hailey series and the final book. And what is new or different about this one compared to the previous 4?
Quite a lot, actually, because I always try to experiment where I can. It can be hard to experiment within the middle grade genre, but in this one, I think of it as 3 novellas rather than Act 1, Act 2, Act 3. And so in the first novella, we go to a whole new moon that we've never visited before, with a whole new set of world building stuff and new characters. And then in the second novella, we go back in time to 2.8 million years to the days when life flourished on Mars, and we meet the ancient Martians. So again, that's all new territory we're breaking into this book, and we find out that the mysteries that we've been wondering about them throughout the other 4 books. And then the third novella, Act 3, we come back to Mars of Mariners Valley that we know from the first 4 books, but it's because it's post-apocalyptic now, because book 4 ends with an apocalypse. So even that has changed. So the whole thing is new, really.
Right. So, as it's the last book in the series, why did you decide to bring it to an end?
Well, all good things must come to an end. And if you think, I mean, I was trained on my MA that stories have a beginning, a middle, and an end. It's what we call narrative structure. Or if you're a postmodern writer, things have a middle, a beginning, a middle, an end, and a beginning. But I'm a beginning, middle, and an end. And the stories have that narrative structure. So do story arcs. And this is the books are part of a story arc. Each book is a standalone with its own beginning and resolution and everything you need to know. But they are part of a wider story arc. And so, you know, we don't want it just to go on and to sort of lose energy and to get stodgy. Better to quit while you're ahead, leave them wanting more, I hope, and give it an urgency to it. So that's why I decided to end it.
Right.
And that was always the plan from word go.
You always planned to do 5?
I did. Well, I did think about 7, but maybe that was a bit ambitious, so I decided 5 was better.
Fair enough. It's a good number. So, will any of the favorite characters come to a grisly end before the final page? And is there any possibility of further adventures in the Zeke Hailey universe?
Well, I'm afraid a lot of our beloved heroes and villains will come to a very grisly end. That already started at the end of book 4, if you've read that. And so it's the end. So, you know, there's going to be lots of heartbreaking moments for everybody. I'd always thought that I wouldn't, because I'm a great one for going forward, and I thought, you know, do something new. But because recently it struck me that I've put so much work into the world building, into the intellectual property that I call Mariner's Valley, that it's like I'm walking out of this playroom that I spent 10 years building, and why would I want to leave this playroom when I've invested so much time? So, you know, it is possible I might in the future come back, open up the playroom and pick up those toys that I've created and, you know, go for another adventure. But
that would be lovely. So, the Zeke Hailey series, as was mentioned earlier by Jerry, it's for middle grade readers. Are there any differences between writing for this age group compared to writing for adults?
Oh, absolutely, yes. So obviously you're writing for that reading age, middle grade. That's a publishing term, not an educational term. It's kind of like 9 to 10 to 12-ish. So, you know, in terms of language, vocabulary, sentence structure, and then also content, you know, there's not going to be no sex and violence in it. I always think of action rather than violence in the Zeke Hailey books. There's a little bit of fisticuffs, but not much. So that's different. And then also, I think for me, with children's and mid-grade literature, there's an excuse to have a lot of fun. You can have dastardly villains, and you can have true blue heroes, and you can have all these flights of fantasy. There's loads of flights of fantasy in the books where they go into dreams or into the second dimension or, you know, back in time. So it's just that sort of gives you that license to do all kinds of wonderful stuff that it would be harder to pull off in adults fiction.
Okay, fair enough. So, if anybody else out there would like to start to become a sci-fi writer, if they're thinking about becoming a sci-fi writer, do you have any recommendations for them?
Yeah, it'd probably be the same for most genres. So first of all, read your subject matter, read the greats, but read the new writers that are coming out so that you're well versed in your genre and in the art of writing. And then write, never stop practicing. You know, even if you write a story that you can't finish or you go off it, that's all part of growing as a writer. So write. And then I think really network. So what do I mean by that? I mean, start looking around for allies, groups, conventions. So, you know, join critique groups. You learn so much from a critique group, both about your own work and about the art of writing. So let's take talk about my experience to give you an example. I'm here in Nottingham, so I'm a member of Nottingham's Writers Studio, where I get to meet other writers and we share our work. I'm plugged into Writing East Midlands and Nottingham City of Literature, and a little bit away, but the Leicester School of Writing. We have all these wonderful resources where you can meet other writers, and then there are conventions, of course, like EdgeLit and other kinds of things where you could get to meet published writers face to face, and you know, workshops. So do that thing, and courses. Go to any course that you think is relevant to you. The Nottingham Writers Studio does a lot of courses. And then there's so many online groups. I mean, so I'm a member of the British Science Fiction Association, which again gives a whole other layer of people to meet and critique groups and things like that. Because I write for children, I'm a member of Scooby, Society and Children's Writers Book Illustrators. So that's a whole level of critique groups again, and employment, publishing opportunities and all kinds of things. So write, read, network. I hope that makes sense.
Okay.
I enjoy it.
You mentioned critique groups. What happens in a critique group? I've never heard of that before.
Yeah, okay. So that's usually where a small number of writers meet regularly over a period of time, usually not more than 4 or 5, and they take it in turns to submit work in good time, so the other writers to critique it, and then they meet together to give feedback, to share feedback. So usually maybe 1 or 2, maybe 3 writers will submit to the group. I mean, like anything, there are good critique groups, there are bad critique groups. I think it's really important to set rules to the critique groups and follow those rules. So I've been in online critique groups through Scooby, and I've been in face-to-face critique groups with Nottingham Writers Studio, and also of course through my MA that we had critiquing groups on my MA. So it's where a group of writers come together to share their writing and give feedback in a positive and kindly and honest fashion, and to take that feedback. If you're there and you shared your work with 4 other people, if one of them says, "Oh, I don't like that," well, they might be wrong. But if 4 of them say, "No, we didn't like that bit," they're probably going to be right. See, so you learn so much, and when you're critiquing your colleagues' writing, you continue learning. So I think it's invaluable.
That sounds really good. So you don't tear each other to shreds, you do it nicely.
Well, I mean, you could have groups like that, but that's probably not a good group to be in.
No, probably not. Right. So I've got one more question for you. What is next for you? What is next for Ian? What are your writing plans for the future? What are you working on?
Well, things seem to be picking up a bit since COVID, thank the sci-fi lords. And so, I mean, in a couple of weeks, I'm doing a school visit, first school visit since COVID, as part of the Newark Book Festival. I've got several training courses I'm running in the autumn with Nottingham Writers Studio. Please check those out on Nottingham Writers Studio's website. I've got a couple of stories coming out soon. Very small. One's already out. That's a reprint in a children's anthology in America, which is kind of cute. That's my story, The Curse of the Were Spider. It's The Were Spider Returns. And I've also got an adult short story with what I consider a flagship science fiction publication magazine in this country, but I'm not allowed to say which one it is yet because the contracts haven't been signed. So I've got this story coming out with I'm very pleased to be in this magazine soon. And of course, I mean, as I say, now that the Zeke Hailey books are coming to a close, in a way I'm an unemployed writer again. And that's scary and nerve-wracking, but I am writing, and I never stop writing. I'm a compulsive writer. And I'm working on a couple of adult science fiction stories. Well, one's more of a Sci-Fi, but one I'm sort of started writing on is an adult sci-fi. It will be much longer than the mid-grade novels and darker. But I don't have a publisher for it. So, you might see me in a couple of years in the street, with my cap out saying, "Writer, we'll write for 2 pennies," sort of thing. We'll write for coins. And please be kind if you see me there.
Oh, I'm sure I'll find something for you to write for me. Brilliant. Thanks so much, Ian, for that. So before I ask you to give us one more glimpse into the paradox war with another reading, please, I would like to.
I hope we're going to have I hope we're going to have some questions from the onlookers.
Yes, that is what I'm hoping for. We'll do that after the reading now. Okay. So I would like to ask everybody who is on the book launch, so all our lovely attendees of the book launch, to think of some questions you would like to ask Ian about the book, about being a writer. Yeah, whatever you would like to ask him, really. Put a question in the comments. That is one of the ways you will be eligible to win one of our fabulous prizes today. Because we don't know you're there if you don't interact. We can't just magically know that. Technology is not quite that advanced yet. In Ian's world, it might be, but in the real world, it is not. Of course, you can also like the video stream, the live stream, or just say hi if you don't have a question. But please do send some questions in. Simply put them in the comments, and we will get to those. But for now, Ian, would you do us another reading, please?
Yes, I'd be delighted to. I feel like the priest, an hour reading from. This is a little bit of a longer reading, so it's about 5 minutes, so please bear with me. This is actually the prologue. The Alpha Cephe star system, 2060 AD. Flickering. Lights flickering. Lights flickering in the dark. Flickering. Burning. Fire! Trixie Cutter woke with a gasp. She was on the far ship bridge. The flight controls were spewing smoke. Wires dangled from ruptured panels. Sirens wailed and sparks rained. There was a stench of melting plastic. She tried to jump up, but the safety belt yanked her back. "Zeke, help me!" she cried, wrestling with the belt. Then she saw them. Two figures in the stroboscope were flashing alarms. One still, one desperately moving. The far ship's pilot was strapped across the motherboard. His name was Zeke Hailey, until recently a second-year student at the Chasm School for Psychic Endeavour. His head lolled to one side with eyes white as glass. Trixie had never seen a corpse before, but she knew in an instant. He was dead. "Over here, quick!" cried the other figure. It was Pin Mai Liang, struggling to undo Zeke's straps. Her face was lost in the shadows. Trixie unbuckled and glided over, trembling like a leaf. A robotic voice spoke from the intercom. It was Albie, Zeke's special transport app uploaded onto the far ship's mainframe. "Impact in 14 minutes. "What?" Trixie shrieked. "These straps, undo them. Your powers," Pin Mai shouted above the din. "We've got to escape. We've got to..." Trixie's voice trailed off. They were lost somewhere in the galaxy. Where could they escape to? "I can't die," Trixie wailed. "I'm too important." Pin Mai's hand was a blur of movement. Slap. Trixie jerked back, her cheek stinging. "Focus," Pin Mai said in a voice harder than steel. "Tell her, Albie." "About what, miss?" "Zeke. Master Zeke is dead." Albie began in a calm, passionless tone. "Cause synaptic overload. Every synapse in his brain burned out by the translocation to Alpha Cephe. With 4 nanotherapy, there is a 3% chance of recovery." Pin Mai broke in. "First, we must preserve his body until we can find civilization." Trixie stared blankly at Pin Mai, still rubbing her cheek. "Albie, explain," Pin said. The software resumed. "We have protoplasm on board, used to amplify Master Zeke's brainwaves. The protoplasm is in essence a part of him, constructed from the same DNA. They are compatible." "We're about to crash and you're fussing over a dead body?" Trixie cried. "Albie said that giant cell will preserve Zeke indefinitely, but every second in the air, more of his synapses shrivel beyond repair. In 65 seconds, there will be 0 chance of recovery," Albie stated. "So," Trixie snapped. Pin Mai fixed her with a hard stare. "Your psychokinesis, better than mine. Undo the straps. Submerge him in that thing. Now. Then I can save us." She glanced at the controls. "I know how." Trixie pulled her face. "Why didn't you say so?" Her eyes lit up like light bulbs. All the remaining straps undid themselves simultaneously. The body of Zeke Hailey rose up and headed for the auto door. Pin Mai watched his body glide out of the room. There was a fierce pain inside her chest, as if a black hole was sucking her life away. The spiral had won. He'd gobbled up the entire human race. Yes, she could have fought on, with Zeke on her side. But why bother in a universe without Zeke? What point was there? Pin Mai took a deep breath and balled her fists. This wasn't the end. No, she wouldn't allow it to be. After everything he did, after everything they both did, no. She would turn this ending into a beginning. Only first, she had to stop the far ship crashing into an alien moon.
Well, if that doesn't want to make you read the book, ooh. Brilliant. Thank you, Ian. Right, let's go to your question, folks. Let's have a look if we have some questions that have come in. Let's start with this one here. Jack asks us, how important was diversity when you were writing the books?
Very, very, he says, consciously as a white guy. I mean, I started writing the first book on my MA, which is 15, 16 years ago now. So I had the time to intellectualize what I was doing in a way you don't often get in the hurdy-burdy world of publishing. So I looked at a very famous children's mid-grade series, which is absolutely excellent and mega famous. But I felt it was there were no characters of color in it, which I felt for the 21st century was a bit, lagging behind. There were some interest added later, but a bit tokenistic. So it was very important to me that I tried to be diverse, and which also, is part of the tradition of science fiction, that the space exploration is for everyone. So I tried to very consciously make sure that half the characters were male, half the characters were female. A lot of the female characters have authority and power and agency. There's the institutional power, there's the physical power, there's the power of wisdom, there's power gone wrong or misused. That's the bully, Trixie Cutter. And there's lots of characters who are black, white, South Asian, East Asian. We've got Native American character. So the only thing I didn't do was people with disabilities, because I felt in the future the science will have meant that people with disabilities are no longer needed. So have an opportunity to heal. So that's what I tried to do.
You did that really well, because
Thank you.
I haven't read the latest book, but I know that it's definitely a diverse story, and it's lovely. It's really good. And I can't wait to read the final installment. Okay, let's move on to the next question then. Of the characters, so we've got here a question that's come in from Sue. Are there any characters that change a lot during the book? I'm guessing she means with age, that they go through character changes, maybe even, or from good to bad, from bad to good. Who knows?
I just see Vicky's asked a question actually, but so it's the last book. So a lot of the characters do go. I mean, every book the characters change, but I suppose this is the biggest one. I mean, I had a lot of fun with Trixie Cutter, who goes from being a bad girl to being a not so bad girl. She has an epiphany and changes her ways. Pinmai continues to grow and assert herself and take control. Zeke, he actually early on in the book, we see a side to him which is rather obnoxious. He's presented with things he can't cope with that are outside how he viewed things would be, and he's quite horrible. But he has to grow and accept these people he meets that he first struggles with. So everybody goes, yes.
Lots of changes.
Yes, absolutely. So I'm just looking at some of the questions coming. I don't know if you can see them.
Yes, there's one from Vicky. I'll read it out for everybody. The cover illustrations are very distinctive. How did you choose the style? Thank you, Vicky.
Well, because that's my publisher, my awesome publisher, IFWG Publishing, and we've met Jerry, the CEO. Thank you, Jerry, who's doing the tech and hosting this. So thank you for that. So they choose the covers, and I've always been really pleased with what they do. I think the artists, and it's not the same artists every time, but the artists have all sort of got it right. They've nailed it, and they are good, aren't they? Because as we all know, a cover sells a book, doesn't it? And the title, that's what they say.
Yeah, it does. So we've got a question from Neil Walker. Will you be crossing genres to fantasy or horror? Very good question.
Yeah, and because some of my short stories for adults are fantasy and are verging on horror. I've not quite got the guts for for guts, but sort of what you might think of as soft horror. So yes, and I'd love to write a novel that was a fantasy or horror thingy, but it just takes so long to write a book. It takes me about 2 years to write a book if I really work at it. So I'm not getting any younger. But yes, I mean, and if you look at my website, it could be links to some of my published horror and fantasy stories, which are free to read.
Good stuff. Good stuff. And we have a question from Phil Rollinson. What does this installment have in the way of LGBTQIAP plus representation?
Well, that's a very good question, Phil. And it's difficult when you're writing mid-grade to introduce gay and other orientation characters, because there's always been this idea that mid-grade, where it's for children, we don't go into, it's kind of a sexless universe. We don't go into what happens off the page. In my mind, I know that there's certain characters who I think that character is gay, I think that character is lesbian, and in the adult novel that I'm now writing, which is unpublished, we have transgenderism, where the characters can change their gender at will. But coming back to the paradox war, it's a tricky one. That's a very good question. And if you read it, you might see that one or two characters, you might think, oh yes, that character's gay, but we don't state it very clearly because it is for a young age group.
Okay, good stuff. Let's see if we've got any other questions that have popped in. Right. Well, I will ask one more question here that I think might be useful.
Sorry to interrupt. Thank you, Vicky. Do you have a set daily writing schedule, or is it quite fluid? Well, every Sunday I write a timetable for the week coming, because like everyone, of course, I have other commitments to fit around. Although I don't stick to it rigidly. I mean, if I get a break, I'll go upstairs and write. So a bit of both. I set myself a schedule, but I'm also fluid. I know that's something a lot of writers sort of struggle with, isn't it? And when I do my course at the Writers' Studio in the autumn, those are the sort of things we're looking at, about how to set yourself a schedule, and different things work for different people.
Good stuff. Absolutely. I think it's very personal how everybody writes. Some people will prefer to write in the morning, in the evening, at night, before and after a day job.
Some people do it before they go to work. I would never be one of those.
Yeah, and for some people it is their day job.
Yes, well, two and a half days of the week it's my day job. Yeah.
Very good. That's a nice thing to be able to do. Really dedicate your time to it. Is being a writer just about writing, or are there some other skills that you can also bring into the practice?
Well, yeah. So, I was a teacher, so sorry, something's popping up. So I do a lot of mentoring, and I do a lot of writers' workshops, and I take the skills that I have had from being a professional certified teacher into that. So there's those skills. And then, of course, there's the skills which I think many of us find very difficult: promotion, self-promotion, which I'm crap at. I could promote someone else, but I find it very difficult to promote myself. But that, if you're going to go into writing and you want to be published, if you can learn to sell yourself, that really helps. Because you have to be an accountant, and I'm the team maker. And that was probably it. Yeah, that was it. Yeah.
That's a good number there. Oh, we have another question here from Julie. Would you suggest that to be a good writer, you need to attend a writing course?
Well, that's an interesting one, Julie. Thank you for that. And I know some people say, well, if you're a good writer, you shouldn't need to attend a writing course. But I think, well, artists go to art school, musicians go to music school, dancers go to dancing school. So wouldn't it help if writers go to writing school? Because though you may have tremendous talent as a writer, you can always improve your craft by learning from others, by learning from those that have been before us, by learning from people that perhaps have a PhD and have spent their lifetimes studying and researching and writing, researching writing, the art of writing. And also, of course, if you do a course, it's a really good way of networking. You know, my MA, I've met a lot of people that I'm very fortunate to still be in touch with. It was like an introduction to the writing community in the North Midlands. So I think writing courses can only help.
Oh, I would agree with you. It's like anything. The more you learn, the better you get at it.
Exactly. Yeah. And of course, famously, you know, writers are on their own in their garret, writing their own stuff. People think of it as being a very isolated kind of a job, and which it can be. So get out and meet some other writers. It can only do you good.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you, everyone. There were some really great questions. And remember to interact while we're live in some way by either liking or commenting if you want to be in with a chance to win one of our prizes. And with that, I declare Ian C. Douglas's latest book, The Paradox War, officially launched. Cheers. Ian, would you like to say some final words?
Well, I'd like to thank you, Isi, for being the MC. You're a natural at it. And thank you so much for all the work you put into it. And I'd like to thank Jerry, who's got up at 3 a.m. Australian time to do the technical side and run all this technology, which has worked incredibly well, I think. And so thank you. And thank you, Jerry, and thank you, IFWG, for having faith in me and my books. It's meant so much to me. I can't put it in words, you know, so huge thank yous all round.
Absolutely. Yes. Thanks, Jerry. 3 o'clock in the morning. That's not to be sniffed at. So yeah, that's it for today's book launch. Thank you for attending, and we hope you enjoyed it. Please follow the link that is pinned in the chat to get your copy of The Paradox War. And if you like Ian's books, please remember to leave him a 5-star review on Amazon.
Oh, that would be great. Yeah.
Yes, that'd be very great.
Good thinking.
So yeah, that's it for now. Bye, everybody. And see you at Ian's next book launch.